You taste copper on your tongue before you understand why. The crowd is so close you can feel their breath, hot and sour with wine, spilling into the narrow street. Somewhere behind you a bell rings, too calm, too ordinary for what's about to happen. At your feet, the stone lid has been pried aside. Darkness exhales upward like a living thing. You don't look down. Not yet, because if you look down, it becomes real. She arrives in white. Not the white of celebration, no flowers, no laughter, but the severe white of a vow that was never meant to end like this. Her steps are measured, almost elegant, as if the city hasn't already decided she's guilty. Postumia, Vestal Virgin, sacred guardian, and now Rome's chosen sin, keeps her eyes forward while a nation holds its breath. Before we go deeper, tell me where you're watching from honestly. It still amazes me that an ancient Roman secret can travel across the world to your screen tonight. For Romans, the Vestal Virgins were not just priestesses. They were infrastructure, the heartbeat in the temple, the guarantee that the city would not collapse into chaos. Their sacred fire tended day and night wasn't symbolism, it was a contract. If the flame lived, Rome lived. If it faltered, something was wrong in the bones of the world. And this is why the crime that didn't look like a crime laughter that carried too far, silk that shimmered too brightly, a glance held half a second too long could become a capital offense. Because the Vestals weren't judged the way ordinary people were judged. They were judged like omens. The story that survives pieced together from Roman historians who wrote with both fascination and discomfort centers around a terror that feels almost modern. When a society becomes frightened enough, purity becomes law, rumor becomes evidence, and a woman's body becomes the battlefield where everyone else tries to win back control. The trial that shook Rome was never only about what Postumia did. It was about what Rome feared. It begins, strangely, not with desire, but with weather. A storm breaks without warning, the kind that turns the streets into rivers and makes even the bravest men hurry beneath their cloaks. The wind claws at shutters. Thunder punches the hills. And in the heart of the city, in the round temple where the sacred fire should burn steady as the empire's promise, the flame flinches. Maybe it gutters. Maybe it smokes. Maybe a priest sees a wobble and feels his stomach drop. But in Rome, a flicker is never just a flicker. The next morning, men are already talking as if they've seen the gods' handwriting on the clouds. Bad crops. Sick children. A senator's sudden death. A horse that screams in its stall for no reason. All of it gets dragged into the same basket, a sense that Rome is being warned. And when a warning comes, Rome doesn't ask, "Is this true?" Rome asks, "Who is responsible?" The Vestals are meant to be untouchable. Their very presence can stop an execution. Their word can free a condemned man. They ride through streets where magistrates step aside. They are given seats of honor at games where emperors bow their heads. But that untouchability has a price. They are not allowed to be ordinary. A Vestal is chosen young, taken from her family, and sworn into 30 years of service. 30 years of ritual, discipline, silence, and the kind of public visibility that makes private life impossible. Rome calls them virgins, but what it really means is something more brutal. Rome owns their reputation the way it owns its walls. If a Vestal fails, it isn't just her failure. It's a cosmic breach. So when the fire misbehaves, eyes turn toward the women in white. And not just any woman, Postumia. They had watched her for years. They watched how she walked, how she spoke, how she laughed. They watched the way sunlight caught the folds of her robe. They watched the jewelry too tasteful to be vulgar, too bright to be invisible. They watched, and they waited for meaning, because that's what fear does. It turns observation into accusation. It said the whispers began softly, like a draft under a door. A man in a market mutters that Postumia smiles too much. Another says she has friends among young nobles. A third says he saw her on a street at an odd hour, her hood thrown back, her hair braided like a bride's. None of it proves anything. But rumor doesn't need proof when it's fed by panic. In the temples, priests consult their rituals. In the Senate, men in heavy rings and red-striped togas trade glances that say, "We need to do something." Because Rome is a machine that runs on confidence, and confidence is leaking. So the question becomes, what is the fastest way to reassure a terrified city? You punish the person everyone already suspects. This is how Postumia's fate gets sealed, not in a courtroom at first, but in 1,000 conversations where her name becomes shorthand for corruption. And then one day, there is a formal summons. It arrives with the cold politeness of law. It doesn't say execution. It doesn't say burial. Rome does not speak those words about Vestals because spilling their blood is forbidden. Instead, the language is clinical, sacred, sanitized, impurity, incestum, the crime of violating the vow, a word that stains everything. Postumia is led publicly, deliberately through streets that once bowed for her. The city doesn't throw stones, not yet. That would be messy. That would be disrespectful. No, the cruelty is more Roman than that. They stare. They stare the way people stare at a statue that is cracked. The way you stare at something you once believed in, now broken, and you can't tell whether to mourn it or smash it before it curses you. At the heart of this machinery is the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest, the man with the authority to discipline Vestals. He is supposed to be a father figure to them, a guardian of ritual. But Rome does not give anyone power without expecting them to use it. And when the city is hungry for reassurance, power becomes appetite. The inquiry begins with questions that sound almost gentle. Where were you? Who were you seen with? Why did you dress that way? Why did you laugh? Postumia answers with the composure of someone trained to speak in front of men who will never think she's their equal. She knows what they want. She knows what they're building. She insists on her innocence. She reminds them of her years of service, of the fire she has tended through winters, of the rituals she performed when generals begged for victory. And for a moment, just a moment, the room wavers. Because accusing a Vestal is not like accusing a citizen. It's like accusing the city's soul, but fear is stronger than reverence. And then comes the twist that makes this trial feel less like justice and more like theater. The evidence is not evidence, it's aesthetics. Her elegance becomes suspicious. Her confidence becomes provocative. Her laughter becomes sexual. A life is weighed on the scale of vibes, and the crowd outside, always listening, always hungry, begins to change its posture. They want a conclusion. They want closure. They want to feel the gods are satisfied. A story circulates. The fire flickered because Postumia was not pure. Another story follows it. She has been seen with a man. No one names him at first. That's important. In Rome, unnamed men are protected by fog, while named women are dragged into sunlight. Postumia becomes a symbol with a pulse, and symbols can be killed easily. Rome's legal religion has an elegance that's almost horrifying. The punishment for a Vestal guilty of incestum is not a spectacle of blood. It is a ritual designed to keep hands clean. If the state cannot spill her blood, then the earth will take her. The campus celeratus, the field of wickedness, waits beyond a boundary line like a place the city pretends not to own. And there the most terrifying compromise is prepared. A chamber, a ladder, a bed, a lamp, a little food. Not because they are merciful, because they are meticulous. It's called, in effect, a funeral for the living. The day of the sentence is staged like a civic lesson. The streets fill early. Vendors sell food. Children sit on their fathers' shoulders. There are no chants of pity. Pity would suggest uncertainty, and Rome can't afford uncertainty. Postumia is brought out in her vestal garments. That, too, is deliberate. She is being killed as a Vestal, not as a criminal. The city wants to preserve the illusion that sacred law, not political fear, is doing the work. Her face is calm, enough to unsettle people. It's easier to hate someone who looks guilty. It's harder to hate a woman who looks like she's already made peace with death. But calm can be interpreted as arrogance. And arrogance in a panicked city is unforgivable. The procession moves like a slow tide. Priests, officials, guards, the crowd pressing in, a living wall. Along the route, people crane their necks for details, the tremble in her hands, the wetness in her eyes, the stumble that proves she's human. But she gives them very little. It's said, because stories love irony, that the greatest cruelty is not the burial itself, but the silence around it. No dramatic farewell, no speeches, no pleading that might absolve the watchers. Because if she pleads, then those who watch might feel something. And Rome has built this ritual precisely to prevent feeling. At the edge of the city, the ground has been opened. A rectangular pit. A ladder descending into a chamber carved with the bare necessities, like a parody of a home. A loaf, water, a lamp, objects that pretend this is not murder. The Pontifex Maximus performs the formalities. His words are not angry, they are ceremonial. He speaks like a man repairing a crack in a wall. Postumia stands at the mouth of the pit. Here this is where the story becomes unbearable, because this is the moment when the city's faith confronts the human body. A Vestal's entire existence is public meaning, but standing above that darkness, she is suddenly just a person, young, terribly young, and the crowd can sense it. Somewhere in the mass of faces, someone swallows hard, another shifts their weight. A mother pulls her child closer, not to protect the child from the sight, but to ensure the child learns it. This is what happens when you endanger the city. Rome educates through terror. Postumia looks down. The ladder is narrow. The chamber below is smaller than anyone wants to imagine. The air down there will be cooler, damp, heavy with soil. She doesn't scream, not yet, because screaming would mean giving the crowd what it came for. She steps onto the ladder. 1 rung, 2, 3. The world above becomes a frame of sky and faces. Her white hood catches on the edge for a second, like the city trying to pull her back, or like the city tugging her in. Then she is below the lip. The priest's voice continues. The ritual requires it. And then, with the finality of engineering, the workers begin to close the pit. Stone, earth, packed down. A tomb built in real time. The crowd does not erupt. That's the strange part. There is no triumphant roar, only murmurs, like people leaving a temple after a sacrifice. because even those who wanted her punished feel the chill. They have watched a goddess be stored underground like contraband, and now they must live with what that says about them. But the trial that shook Rome does not end with one burial. Fear rarely settles after one meal. The city watches the skies again. It listens to the wind. It checks the fire, and it finds more omens. Or perhaps it simply keeps looking until it finds them. This is the second spike, the one that reveals the real machinery. Posthumia is not alone. When panic becomes policy, one woman is never enough. The story widens. Names surface. Another Vestal is accused, then another. The sacred order, supposed to be Rome's proof of stability, becomes a pipeline of suspicion. And what makes it more terrifying is how quickly the public adapts. The same crowd that once revered the Vestals learns to treat them like potential contamination. It's as if reverence had always contained the seed of hatred, because what you place on a pedestal, you can also throw off it. In whispers, people debate whether the Vestals have grown too powerful, whether they've become too visible, too comfortable, too human. Some blame luxury, some blame politics. Some blame the changing morals of the city. Some blame foreign influence creeping into Rome like perfume on the wind. Everyone blames something. No one blames fear. Rome wants the gods to be satisfied, but it also wants to be innocent of the act. So the rituals continue. The inquiries tighten. The standards become impossible. If a Vestal smiles, it's flirtation. If she frowns, it's guilt. If she remains neutral, it's coldness proof that she doesn't respect the seriousness of the charge. There is no posture that means safety. And in that trap, the human anchors of this story become painfully clear. Posthumia, yes, but also the city itself, watching and justifying. And then a third spike hits, sharper than the rest. The involvement of men. Because if a Vestal is accused of breaking her vow, someone else must have been there. A lover, a conspirator, a seducer, a corrupter. Yet the system's violence is asymmetrical. Rome can bury a Vestal alive with ceremonial cleanliness, but it can execute a man openly, brutally, as a criminal. So the state has an incentive. Find men to punish too, to prove this is not simply the policing of women, to make it look balanced, to make it look like justice. Names appear in records, nobles, equestrians, men connected to power, and suddenly the trial is not just about sacred fire. It's about faction, influence, who has enemies in the Senate, who is vulnerable. The charge of incestum becomes a political weapon as much as a religious one. A rumor can ruin a man. An accusation can ruin a family. And for a Vestal, a whisper can become a sealed stone lid. Posthumia's story, whether entirely true in every surviving detail or sharpened by later historians, contains the emotional logic of Rome, that the body of a Vestal is a border. Violate it, and the city imagines the world will invade. So the city does what frightened societies often do. It builds a myth of contamination. It searches for rot. It mistakes control for safety. And over time, the ritual itself becomes part of Rome's memory. The buried chamber, the lamp, the loaf, the clean hands of the officials. The paradox is that Rome called this not killing, but everyone knew what it was. They just needed language that made it bearable. Afterward, life returns to normal with terrifying speed. Markets open, senators debate laws, children chase dogs through alleys, lovers meet in doorways. The river keeps flowing, and under the ground there is only darkness and the slow theft of air. The city does not speak her name at dinner tables. Or if it does, it is a warning. Don't laugh too loudly. Don't dress too brightly. Don't make the powerful look foolish. Because what happened to Postumia becomes more than a punishment. It becomes a cultural reflex, a template. When fear rises, sacrifice someone symbolically central. Make the pain visible enough to reassure the crowd, but sanitized enough to preserve the illusion of virtue. It's the genius and horror of Roman ritual. The consequences ripple quietly. Families look at the temple with a new unease. Young girls chosen for the Vestals are taken with an extra layer of dread, not only because of the vow, but because of the knowledge that the vow can become a trap. And the Vestals themselves, those who remain, carry a new kind of silence. They still tend the fire, but now they know the fire is not just a sacred duty. It is a judge that can be bribed by panic. They move differently. They speak less. They avoid brightness, because they have seen what happens when the city decides it needs a villain more than it needs truth. Somewhere in the archives of Rome, in the cool administrative language of priesthood and law, the record is kept: names, accusations, outcomes, because Rome records what it does, even when it is ashamed. They remembered. They recorded. They could not look away. And perhaps the most symbolic artifact is not a physical object at all, but the survival of the method, the humane cruelty, the legal precision of burying alive to avoid blood guilt. A civilization so proud of order that it invented an execution designed to let everyone sleep at night. That's the legacy of the trial that shook Rome, not simply that a Vestal died, but that an entire city learned how to make terror feel like tradition. And now we return to that opening image, a stone lid, damp earth, the crowd pressing in. Because the true sin in this story may not be the one Rome accused Postumia of committing. The true sin may be the one Rome committed together, quietly, in broad daylight. A society can build temples that scrape the sky. It can write laws that outlast empires. It can call itself rational, disciplined, destined, and still, when fear arrives, choose to seal a living person in the ground and call it purity. Long after the crowd dispersed, long after the priests washed their hands, long after the sacred fire steadied, and Rome told itself the gods were satisfied, the earth remained, holding its secret